with Charlie Weimers, a Swedish member of the European Parliament representing the Swedish Democrats. There are increasing numbers of voices warning that there is a potential risk of a civil war on European soil. You are one of those men.
The Islamist idea of the kuffar having the clocks, Islamists having the time. Europe is disintegrating. A terrorist state like the Islamic Republic of Iran, the former deputy speaker of this parliament who was shot in broad daylight in Madrid.
The Spanish politician Alejandro Vidal Quadras has been shot in the face in broad daylight.
Unacceptable. Why are we accepting it? Why are we not throwing out their diplomatic personnel? They attack Jewish institutions.
An explosion at a synagogue as a possible act of terrorism.
They attack Iranian dissidents. They attack European politicians who stand with Iran. This is a prelude of what is coming if they get their way. Right now, they know that they are too few to forcefully change our societies. The best thing we could do now is to continue this turn to the right in Europe so that we can restore the Europe that we grew up.
My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm the founder of Visegrad 24 and I'm standing right outside the European Parliament in Brussels, Belgium. I'm with Charlie Weimers, a Swedish member of the European Parliament representing the Swedish Democrats. Charlie, what a joy to see you, sir.
Great to see you, Stefan.
You're going to be discussing a very difficult question, that of civil war.
Yeah.
There are increasing numbers of voices, not on the far right, not some radical crazy people, but centre-right politicians warning that there is a potential risk of a civil war on European soil. You are one of those men. What is the threat you're talking about? Talk us through it.
Well, one of the major threats is the collapse of social cohesion that we see in more and more parts of Europe. Whole areas being dominated by foreign cultures where the law is no longer really accepted. Where other rules are in place, where the police can't go, no-go zones. So that's one problem. We have the growth of Islam in Europe, which means Islamization, which have taken quite concrete effects in Spain, where pupils are not allowed to eat during Ramadan and so on. In Germany, they are talking about banning music during Ramadan. So we see how Europe is disintegrating, and someone needs to warn for what might happen unless we do something.
What would a civil war look like, according to you?
I would rather, in the initial phase, frame it as civil strife.
Okay.
Perhaps that criminal immigrants that are due to be deported are not accepting the verdict, that the community protects them and stops the police from actually pursuing the deportation decisions. That could be one example. Professors on this area have talked about sabotage against the electric grid, for instance, but an increased amount of violence in society would be the major thing that we would see. People being attacked because of who they are, nothing else. So I see a big risk there.
The report that's been prepared by the ECR, it's a 41-page report about no-go zones, and it walks the reader through what a no-go zone is. One of them that's been identified in the report is 4 or 5 kilometers from here, west from here, it's Molenbeek, the other one being Saint-Denis in Paris. But there is also one in Sweden, in Rosengård, Malmö.
Yeah.
Malmö being the second or third city of Sweden, and Rosengård being a neighborhood that I actually went to, and I interviewed people in many years ago. Tell me, Charlie, about the no-go zones that you are familiar with in Sweden and how they've transformed. Sweden was this utopia. When I was growing up, I remember having my mother read us books by Astrid Lindgren. I think many children around Europe grew up with those, and this sort of idyllic country, this utopic country, and this disintegration that has come over several decades of mass migration. Talk me through some of these neighborhoods.
So one of the neighborhoods being, of course, Rosengård outside in Malmö. We have Angered in Gothenburg, and we have several areas in Stockholm, and 65 of them all over the country.
Wow.
So it is becoming less and less of this Pippi Longstocking land that you read about, that I grew up in.
Sure.
A country where we were very free to make mistakes late at night in the city, free to let our 7-year-old walk to school by himself, and so on and so forth, like I did. Now, what we're seeing is that people of Swedish descent move out of these areas. And they are being filled with immigrants, and those immigrants who make it, they move out of those areas. So there's a very high turnaround in these areas, creating a sort of an area devoid of social capital, basically. People don't trust each other, and there's not really a dominating culture, not the Swedish culture, but also not any other national culture. So it's either ghetto culture or Islamic culture that dominates those areas. And they set up own family councils to judge in accordance with Sharia and so on and so forth in many places in Europe. If you look at law enforcement and first responders, law enforcement is having big problems acting freely in those areas because they are detested by many, not least the criminal gangs, but also many others in those neighborhoods. Ambulances, they get stones thrown at them, and they are never really allowed to go without police escort into those areas, and people block ambulances from leaving the areas. So that's a typical example of a no-go zones. And of course, unemployment, school results, everything. But one of the great things with this report that the ECR and New Direction have launched is that it shows so clearly that that the claim that this has with socioeconomic factors to do is utter BS. It does not stand the test of reality. So if you look at poor neighborhoods with mostly Swedes or other European parts of Europe, Italy, for instance, you can see that, yeah, they may be poor, but they are law-abiding. So immigration, this report shows, has a very strong connection to the crime and to the gangs and to the corruption in these neighborhoods.
Would you be able, Charlie, to walk safely through Rosengård in Malmö or Rinkeby in Stockholm? Would you be able to enter a no-go zone and walk through it and be safe?
I don't know. I mean, I'm known for my anti-Islamist stance in Europe, so maybe that would cause some problems for me. I would not do it without police escort because I honestly don't know what would happen. I remember the last time I was in Rosengård, it was for a political festival, that tax-funded political festival. And I remember the kids there when we came, oh look, the Swedes are coming.
Wow.
That's the degree of segregation, you know? But I mean, of course, the worst experience is for those Swedes of Jewish descent. They are constantly attacked in a city like Malmö. They are, and many of them are. And there's
obviously
to Israel.
a massive synagogue in Malmö. Malmö used to be quite a big center of Jewish life in Sweden, and I remember walking around that synagogue and seeing armed guards patrolling it. Yeah. It was a very impressive sight to see. And this was at least 10 years ago when I went out there and did some filming about 10 years ago. Yeah. Charlie, you're one of the big proponents in the European Union and in European politics of countering Islamism. You've stood at the forefront of initiatives like proscribing the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization, proscribing the IRGC as a terrorist organization, banning Al Jazeera, the Qatari-funded network, from broadcasting. Talk me through some of these initiatives that you've led, why you're at the forefront of them, and why they aren't being passed?
Well, yeah, I could go on about that for a very long time. But okay, so why am I doing this? The fact that a terrorist state like the Islamic Republic of Iran is allowed to pursue terrorist actions on European soil is just unacceptable. Why are we accepting it? Why are we not throwing out their diplomatic personnel? Why are we not designating their lackeys as terrorists? I think the reason is fear in many ways, that European politicians don't know what would happen if we do. But I mean, it's already happening. They attack Jewish institutions, they attack Iranian dissidents, they attack European politicians who stand with Iran, like the former deputy speaker of this parliament who was shot in broad daylight in Madrid. I mean, why are we not doing more? Please ask them, because they should answer. Finally now, the EU has designated the IRGC, but it's way too late, and the embassies are still open around Europe. We should do like Australia, close them and throw them out. So the Muslim Brotherhood is a very opportunistic organization. They know what they're doing, and they act according to the Islamist idea of the kuffar having the clocks, but themselves Islamists having the time. So right now they know that they are too few to forcefully change our societies. So they infiltrate our organizations. They make sure to get tax money. They make sure to get legitimacy from naive politicians who want to appear to be doing good, virtue signalers. So until they reach a situation in which they can dominate in a way that we've seen in, for instance, France, when the Islamo-gauchists, the Islamo-left, take over city halls after the mayoral elections. They almost, chase out the old mayor, screaming, now it's time for us.
Yes.
This is a prelude of what is coming if they get their way. They will chase us out of our own homes. That's why we need to designate them as the terrorist organizations that they are.
The demographic changes of Europe are now undeniable.
Yeah.
This isn't the early 2000s where people who were warning that opening the floodgates of migration will transform Europe, and it required some understanding of foresight and some understanding of demographic modeling to be able to imagine a society which becomes 5, 10, 15% Muslim. We are now at stages in which many cities are minority indigenous populations. London is today minority white British. Many other cities around Europe are minority white French, minority white Italian, minority white Swedish.
Yeah.
And yet, the liberal elite, the parties that dominate in the European Parliament, to this day seem to refuse to acknowledge the reality of what mass migration is doing to Europe as a continent, and mostly to the working classes, the indigenous working classes of European countries. Those are the people that are first affected, that are most displaced, whose children suffer the most in schools, who suffer the most because of the erosion of social services, be they health services, be they pensions. All of these things disproportionately impact the working classes and the poorer and the less fortunate. And yet the elites here seem to refuse to acknowledge that any of this is happening. Why? You sit in this parliament. You see members of Renew, members of the EPP, members of the Socialists every single day. Why do you think they refuse to acknowledge these realities, Charlie?
I think some of them are actual cynics. They make an electoral calculus, and they see that these new groups will mostly vote left, and that's a good thing. Others are not only cynical, but straight out oikophobic, the far left. They want the Islamists to help them bring down this society as a whole, because they hate everything with this society: capitalism, liberty, and tradition. So that's why we see this Islamo-leftist alliance. Now, then we have the centrists who claim to be in favor of liberty, but opening the floodgates to people from cultures where freedom is unheard of. Now, I think they believe that they stand on the right side of history. I do think some of them actually do. And they choose to ignore the consequences of this. And maybe it's a crisis of imagination that they have lived so long in a prosperous society like Western Europe, Western European nations have been, that they cannot imagine a real catastrophe like many Eastern Europeans can do, because they lived under Soviet occupation for so long. I also would like to refer to what Professor David Betts names normalcy bias. That look around, Stefan. It looks rather normal, doesn't it?
It does.
And I was in Malmö a few weeks ago. I had a good time. I ate Swedish meatballs, and I enjoyed it.
Sure.
But if you scratch behind the surface, there are a lot of things going on, and that's where demography comes in, because you reach a point at which real change will occur, and when that real change occurs, then it's too late. We see
Are we close to that inflection point?
We are getting closer and closer. So this example from Catalonia, where they tried to force Ramadan upon pupils, don't eat in front of Muslim pupils and so on. That's one example. Talking about Catalonia, a few years ago, a Christian procession, Catholic procession during Easter was attacked by Moroccan immigrants. Why? Because Ramadan and Easter was at the same time, and you're not supposed, according to Sharia, to show your faith during Ramadan if you're not a Muslim.
Wow.
So, and you saw the same thing outside Paris. So these are signals that we should understand. And of course, the most clear signal of them all is how anti-Semitism has spiked, of course. That's the canary in the coal mine. I would say that if the working class continue to punish the Social Democrats at the polls, as they've started to do, as they hopefully will do in the UK as well, with Labour, then some of the Social Democrats will, actually go in our direction. But it won't be heartfelt. It will be, they will see the sword of Damocles, and they will realize that, okay, we're about to lose. But it's not out of patriotism. It's about self-preservation. So the best thing we could do now is to continue this turn to the right in Europe, so that we can restore the Europe that we grew up in.
Charlie, my final question. Do you have any hope?
I do have hope, because I've got five children. Why would I put them to this world if I did not have hope? No, I believe that we can restore our countries. Sweden, after decades of mismanagement, is now turning around. We are implementing laws to deport foreign criminals, to strip dual nationals of their citizenships, Swedish citizenships, and to really root out the so-called Islamic civic society that's been working to Islamize Sweden for so long with our own money. So yes, we can do things, and we see that Sweden is the only Western European nation in which the voter satisfaction with the state of democracy is on the rise. So we can save our country, we can save democracy, but we need to speak plainly, we need to be determined and forceful, and we need to never lose hope.
Charlie Weimers,
Thank you.
thanks so much.